Yeah, they're calling it hallucinations. This article is saying that it's not hallucination because it's not imagining something, it's making stuff up. They say that anthropomorphizes. That makes us think like the AI is a real human being. No, it doesn't care at all. It just made stuff up. It's not an hallucination. That's why it says a better word than hallucination is ChatGPT and other AI will make stuff up because its goal is just to answer your question and give you something that will impress you that it answered the question. And it does a good job of impressing people. And sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not true, but it doesn't care. It fed its goal. If it feeds you stuff that's true, that met the goal of impressing you, great. If it fed you stuff that's just made up, a hallucination in that terminology, that's just in the ChatGPT article, it's also happy. It fed you something and that impressed you.
Hi there, I'm Denise Chaffin, and I am your podcast host for Talking TA. And today I have with me Eric Maass, a years-long colleague and friend from, a couple different companies that we've worked at together. And Eric is the founder of Six Sigma, and he's also a consultant to companies like IBM, BD, Roche, Biorad, and IEEE. And he's also an adjunct professor for ASU. Arizona State University. I better qualify that. Eric, welcome. Thank you so much. We are going to launch in today. Eric he's created some presentations for some companies like IEEE and IBM on the subject of AI. And as we roll into the new year, I would love to have a conversation with you about this, Eric, because you and I had a previous discussion around this, and I thought you'd be a great guest for our show to kind of go below the surface of the water here and discuss AI. So quickly introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background.
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, thank you, Denise. A little bit about my background. So, educationally, I have a bachelor's in biology, dual masters in chemical engineering and biomedical engineering, worked for 30 years at Motorola as an electrical engineer, and got my PhD in industrial engineering. So I'm either very broad spectrum or very confused. Take your pick. Um, in terms of, I worked for 30 years at Motorola, as I mentioned. That's where I met you, Denise. And then when Motorola started breaking into pieces, because there was a corporate deal where it got broken into smaller pieces, I was in the corporate group that got dissolved. So I took retirement, my first retirement. I took retirement. I wrote a book, then got hired by Medtronic, worked there for 11 years, retired again, wrote a second book. And the week that I retired, October 4 years ago, that very week is when my granddaughter was born. So I like to say I was promoted from senior director to grandpa. So that's my quick little background.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So we can talk about that a little bit more detail in a minute or later in our conversation about the articles and books that you've written, especially as it relates to AI. In our previous discussion, we were talking about AI and you were giving me some of the key points to one of your presentations that you've created for IBM. And I said, oh my gosh, that would really be some great information to share with our human resources and talent acquisition audiences. From your perspective, Eric, what are some of the benefits of AI as we are moving forward this year, 2025, into a new phase, right? With AI and the tools that we'll be using. So what, in your perspective, are some of the benefits of AI for human resources and talent acquisition?
Okay, I believe the benefits for AI and recruiting and things like that is it makes things go a little bit faster and have a structured way of doing things that goes a little bit faster with not as much human interaction, more by the computer. So a lot of things that you had to do manually or over the phone yourself, whatever else, AI can replace those and do them for you more quickly. They can screen out possible applicants to find more fitting candidates, hopefully, then help you streamline the recruiting and hiring process, and then help you write some of the things you have, rejection letters, hopefully not as often, but I'm afraid more often than acceptance letters. But being able to compose things, be able to write job descriptions more quickly. In terms of people who are already in the workforce, they can help with helping to come up with descriptions and helping the process of promotions, helping the process of analyzing teams and pulling together what needs to happen for a team to work together well and to interface well to make the human resources be better leveraged by the organization. I guess that's sort of the first things that come to mind for me.
What about the liabilities? Because that was another part of our discussion.
Then the negative side,
Especially as we integrate AI into our processes.
I can go pretty far with this. I'll start off gentle with this. Part of the problem with AI is the flip side of the positive of AI. It makes things faster in many ways, but it can make things faster that are not so good. Um, and I talk about the different types of artificial intelligence. Right now, the one that's getting most of the attention is LLM, large language model like ChatGPT. But other things like having autonomous cars is getting a lot of attention. And I imagine the parts that are being leveraged into human resources are probably the analysis of information and also helping to screen people. Um, and the downside I would see of that, of making it faster, is making it, first off, more impersonal, but also taking the human judgment out and replacing it with something that not may not work as well. And I say that may not work as well carefully, and let me elaborate a bit. And without getting too much of like making this an AI lecture, there are several types of AI. And most of the types of AI that I think might being used now imitate a form of intelligence. There is a best-selling book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, the winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002. He won the Nobel Prize in Economics because he overturned the theory about how we human beings make decisions. The assumption was we were rational in making our decisions. He showed we're not, we're irrational. And there's a book about that called Predictably Irrational by Dr. Daniel Ariely of Duke University. And even there's this TV series now called Irrational based on that as well. But anyway, we're irrational. We make decisions based on, the fancy word for it is heuristics, rules of thumb. And the problem with the screening process of I believe, would be that it imitates that form of thinking, heuristic thinking. And so it just searches through the resume and makes sure the right words are there. And if the right words aren't there, rejects the person and doesn't put any more of thinking behind it. So, hey, uh, 7,000 people just got rejected. They actually, many of those 7,000 are good foots, but they didn't have the word, I don't know, machine learning in their resume, or they didn't have the word bacteria and they have to work on bacteria. Maybe they used other things that means it. And anybody who read the resume actually know, hey, these are experts in bacteria, or these are experts in AI, including machine learning. But those words were not in there. And the heuristic that was there is looking for those words, candidate rejected. So you might have a situation where many promising candidates would get rejected because we're using heuristics. So that would be one of the downsides I would see of AI, is it's imitating that negative side of human intelligence, of using heuristics to make all the decisions. In humans, a heuristic would be like, if the price is too low, there's got to be a catch. Or if I don't know what I do, what does everybody else tell me what to do? Those are heuristics we use. And if we do artificial intelligence based on heuristics, then it's just looking for a cue that says, hey, this person is good, this person, reject them. And so I say that that is kind of the negative, or the, I think you call the liability of artificial intelligence in that aspect of recruiting and staffing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We have had we've heard these discussions, but it's always good to get the, again, deeper level an understanding of the liabilities and the assets, of course, because people are spending an awful lot of money on these tools. Speaking of which, so as executives who are creating budgets and determining budgets for AI tools that we're going to be integrating into HR and talent acquisition processes? What are some of the considerations that executives need to be looking at when making these budget decisions for their new tools?
Of course, to me, it comes out to starting with a cost versus benefit. So some of those AI tools right now, to most of us in the world, to make us familiar with it, things like ChatGPT and the Google version and then whatever else are essentially free to us. And so they're doing that for publicity. And I'm sure they're charging companies much more so they can actually make money. You have to have a monetization approach. And so realize that the cost is there is oh, you have the benefit, but what are you replacing? So what are you gaining and where are you saving money and what is it enhancing in terms of the bottom line for the company? If it's simply replacing a human resource people, before I needed 10 recruiters, now with HR I only need 2. Okay, did the cost of it make up for those 8 people, and is it making as good of decisions as you would have had with 10 people? So that's kind of the cost benefit analysis, the quality and the timeliness of the decisions and how that gets translated into financial benefit, and the quality of the people and the time it takes to hire them and the number of people versus the alternatives. So kind of a comparison of the alternatives and seeing if it pays for itself. But then there's going to be other costs associated with it, making wrong decisions, having a non-personal person rejecting you and giving no feedback may impact your image in the marketplace. And everybody who was rejected and didn't get a letter at all or got something that sounds very impersonal, they will tell all their friends and relatives, I never again want to buy from such and such company, and you shouldn't either. No, we won't. There's a value of the brand name as well. So you have to also take that probably as a secondary consideration, but also into consideration in making these executive decisions. In terms of retention of existing employees, how effective is it? Kind of the cost benefit analysis, but how effective is what you're doing with it? What is your plan for doing it? The natural tendency, we sometimes refer to it as the shiny object syndrome. AI is right now a shiny object, and you need to feel like you're cool and you're with it and you're up to date. And so I'm going to invest in AI, even though I don't understand what it is and I don't understand what it's going to bring for me and what it's going to cost me. And so you have to be a little careful and make decisions as if it's not a shiny object kind of thing. And that's a little tougher for us human beings to do because we like the shiny objects. We like to be cool. And hey, I'm using AI at work. I will mention there, I do have to mention to you, I think, Denise, I've told you that I'm an early user of AI and an early adopter. So I will say that, that's my shiny object. I had that shiny object syndrome back around 1989, 1990. So before many people on this broadcast may have been born. We used AI for an inspection process. We had operators that were looking into a microscope and then looking away and having to refocus to write things down and take notes about what they saw under the microscope as they were inspecting things back and forth. It was hard on the operators. We listened to them and we thought we could have a way that we could bring in AI. And so we did. We had it where they would talk into a microphone, kind of like my microphone here, and it would recognize what they're saying and it would write it for them and they could stay focused on their job of inspection and not have to defocus and come back and forth. And we actually published an article about that. I think we did it in 1989. I think it got published. It had a tremendous impact on productivity. So for us, I guess that was a shiny object, but we saw the value of it was in terms of the impact on people, of the stress on people. And we were able to show an improvement, I think, of 23%, I think was the efficiency improvement, if I remember correctly. And the cost was reasonable. It was an investment in the future and it took a while, but that efficiency we were able to show did pay for itself.
That's really interesting. Now, why did it take 30 years then for AI to advance itself to where we're at now? I mean, seriously, that's a long time ago. And it's almost like and people have talked about AI being around for a long time, so I appreciate that example because it we don't hear stories like that.
Well, yeah, thank you. Well, mostly it waited for the state of the art of technology of integrated circuits that you and I worked with when we worked at Motorola to a large extent to catch up, to be to the point. I mean, let me go outside of AI for a moment and then come back to AI. I mean, everybody looks at all the things that a cell phone can do now. Well, cell phones were invented by Marty Cooper at Motorola around the time I joined them. So in the 1970s, I joined in 1979. why did it take so long to get to the point where we can take pictures, have it using this as a GPS, tell us where we are? Well, it was the ability to get to digital signal processors with that many integrated circuits on the chip. And the same thing is happening with AI. The ability to get to the point where we are was the ability, primarily, a lot of things right now are using deep neural networks. And neural networks require a lot of transistors. It's imitating the human brain with all the neurons in the human brain. That's why it's called a neural network. And you have to have a whole bunch of transistors to be able to build this circuitry to have all these layers of helping them make these relationships between the inputs and then giving you out your essay for your class in school. So it was the kind of the state of the art, being able to build up these large enough chips with that kind of architecture, with that number of transistors in that way. And I think that's why companies like NVIDIA and whatever else are having their market value, ability to be able to create that technology that enables that. So AI, the first applications of AI included the voice recognition that I'm mentioning. One of the first applications of AI, Microsoft used AI to win out in the word processor market. So talking about back in time. So this is before many of you our people listening may know, but in the old days, one of the early applications of computers, there are people thinking that a computer was worthless. We now know that a computer is not worthless. It may be annoying, but it's not worthless. But
Yeah.
what would be a good application? What software should you put on there that had broad application? And one of the first big obvious applications was replacing typewriters. You had all these people out there with typewriters. Well, you could just type on a keyboard on a computer, but you need word processing software. So a whole bunch of companies started creating word processing software. Microsoft Word won out. How did Microsoft Word win out? According to Bill Gates, and this is from an interview he had with the LA Times like 25 years ago, was they integrated artificial intelligence in the form of a form of artificial intelligence called Bayesian networks. They built a Bayesian network into Microsoft Word so it would figure out what most likely you were typing and start to correct your spelling and your grammar, put periods, capitalize right words. And that, according to Bill Gates, is how they won out. And that's how Microsoft really took off with its win in Microsoft Word. And so that was one of the early applications of artificial intelligence was a Bayesian network built into the original Microsoft Word and allowed to beat out its competitors. And so it's been around for a while, but kind of low key. And the early neural networks, which just a few of neurons imitating the brain. Our brain, we're making all these calculations and everything else and making all these decisions with all these neurons in the brain, trying to imitate that in hardware and then having the software being able to leverage that ability. Took a while for the technology for there to be developed in terms of the integrated circuits, and then the technology in terms of the software being able to leverage that to be able to build layers and layers of these networks to imitate the layer of complexity of the brain and be able to create a deep neural network and then get it to the point where you could train it where it could help you do things that are impressive. And so they finally thought, hey, it's time. ChatGPT said, let's give it to the world, make it free for a while. I don't know if it's going to be free forever, but make it free for a while, get a big splash. And so this thing we've been talking about for years suddenly has a big splash, and now everybody's talking about artificial intelligence.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, and ChatGPT does have a free version, but also has the advanced version that you can pay for. Same with Gemini, which is Google's. That's the one I.
Thank you.
But so, what are some of the AI inadequacies and issues that might impact, right, its effectiveness on HR and talent acquisition tools at this point?
So I started talking about one of the inadequacies, and it's a basic problem with the form of AI we're using in general. And that first thing is, well, it basically comes down to the fact that it's using heuristics. It's imitating the human mind, but it's imitating the approach of thinking, and that thinking fast and slow. It's imitating the thinking fast. As they said, there's a bestseller called Thinking Fast and Slow by the winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics, Daniel Kahneman, and it's imitating the thinking fast, being able to make fast decisions. And that's basically looking at things being this going with this, what we call correlation. When this happens. And looking for correlations. It takes lots and lots and lots of data, and it's looking for correlations. All right. So the first problem with that you will see is the fact that it needs lots of data. So if you're looking for a role that's a very small role, there's not many people who have that role. There's not a lot of data out there. So ChatGPT, Gemini is not going to work well if there's not sufficient data to be able to analyze it through or take it through its neural network and figure out those linked correlations to be able to give you good answers. And so it's going to be generally fairly useless for rare, unusual job openings. I mean, I'm going to take an analogy outside of the world of HR for just a moment, but come back. This is somewhat personal to me. I have a rare disease. I think I became a case study at Mayo Clinic because there's like, I don't know, at the time we're like 5 people in the United States that have this illness. Will artificial intelligence help me? Not at all. There's no conclusions AI could do for the fact there's only 5 of us. I think it's now up to 25. Still too few for AI to help me. I have to figure things out for myself. There is no thing out there to help any with a rare illness. Similarly, AI is not going to help you with rare positions. And as you said, Denise, that's very, very common. It's going to have trouble finding something for a rare position.
So let's go into that then. Since we're hearing that the human factor, right, is going to still be relevant in so many areas of business where AI is supposed to be helping and contributing, right, to making our lives easier. The human factor, though, for human resources and talent acquisition, what is your suggestion for the success then of the future of work, for example?
Yeah, it is bringing in the human factor, as you said. I think the idea is not to try to compete with AI where it's strong, but help it where it's weak or where it's wrong. I guess that rhymes. Not where it's strong, but where it's wrong. Where it's weak or where it's wrong. But I just came over I'm going to make that little slogan, put that on a business card or whatever else. Um, but so first off, it's not going to be used in rare situations. So maybe figuring out how to use AI to supplement your talents in those rare issues, but it will probably be a different form of AI. And I'm going to explain that in a moment. So the neural network approach depends on huge amounts of data. Is there an approach of AI that does not? Well, I say there's actually basically 3 forms of AI. The one that's getting all the publicity, primarily now with the large language networks, are the neural networks, deep neural networks, for the fact that it's just an expanded, but still neural networks. The other two, rule-based, behavior-based systems, and the other based Bayesian. Now, I mentioned Bayesian a moment ago. Bayesian approaches of artificial intelligence is how Microsoft says it won in the word processing wars. That's Bill Gates who said that, so has some credibility that was stated. I think it was 1996, LA Times interview. Bayesian belief networks don't depend on huge amounts of data in general. They can use huge amounts of data, but you basically build a network based on your understanding of what affects what. And so within the world of AI, there is actually more than one school of thought. And I'm going to talk about 2 schools of thought that goes basically right now kind of aligns kind of sort of with neural networks versus Bayesian networks, in my mind. The neural networks is the one that's getting all the attention. The Bayesian network people tend to get involved with this subfield called causal learning, where you try to understand that there's a difference between correlation and causality. All right. On hot days, there are more ice cream sales. Okay. And more people need to drink lots of water, and more people might go swimming. Does eating ice cream cause you to go swimming? An AI program would say, yeah, because they go together. Right. All right. But if you understand, well, there's a root cause, it's a hot day, we're going to go swimming and we're going to have ice cream. You can see the relationship there. So finding instead of just looking at correlation and things go together, but what's the cause and what's the effect, or is there a separate cause in general? One of the big controversies that involved this field as well, AI kind of sort of, but more the field of causation versus correlation, was about smoking causing cancer. In the 1950s, a Bayesian statistician by the name of Jerome Cornfield looked at some data and analyzed it using Bayesian methods and showed that there's a causal link, or implied there's a causal link between smoking and lung cancer. And the tobacco lobby that was very big at the time fought against it and looked at with correlation and said, well, yeah, there's a correlation, but it can be explained all sorts of ways. Maybe there's a common genetic factor that predisposes people to become smokers and also predisposes them to cancer. Well, that turned out to be a garbage hypothesis. And so eventually the Surgeon General said, no, smoking causes lung cancer. There's a delay between smoking and lung cancer. You smoke and it takes a few years later you end up with lung cancer, but there's a causal link. We're going to put cigarette warnings. We're going to put warnings on cigarettes. And that causality is something that AI using neural networks is going to struggle with. And you're going to say the same kind of things in HR. Hey, all the people that are good at HR, that are doing very, very well, all went to Harvard. Let's just hire people from Harvard. Well, maybe it's because if you look at a causal link, well, maybe all these people were hired at Harvard into these high things because the guy in charge came to Harvard and he just wanted to hire people he knew and talk to the professors at Harvard. And it was a nature. The cause was not the fact that Harvard people were wonderful and therefore they should be put in these executive positions. There was a different reason. The guy in charge of the company went to Harvard. He hired other people from Harvard. He hired their children from Harvard. He talked to the professors at Harvard. Maybe there's another reason why all the executives came from Harvard. Maybe it's not that the Harvard people just make the best executives. Maybe they do. Maybe there is a causal link, but the correlation does not prove causality. You need to build a model. And that building model is called causal learning. It's another form of AI. And the most common form, the most advanced version in my mind of causal learning are Bayesian networks, also called Bayesian belief networks.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we went down 10 feet into the water on that one. All right, let's take a step back for a second. Again, we're our audience here is HR and talent acquisition, right? So, looking at what we're using right now, all right, so applicant tracking systems, sourcing tools, as we call them in talent acquisition, where we're looking for candidate resumes, where we're looking for trying to identify, like you mentioned a while ago, the right candidates for a particular role, especially for a really difficult role. And I remember having one several years ago. In fact, it's on my website, the story about it. We were trying to find somebody who was a tissue sourcing specialist. And you would know about this. This is for Medtronic. We were looking for this person. And this tissue sourcing specialist had to have knowledge of all the different pig farmers around the United States who are raising a certain type of pig that would be used later on for heart transplants because these particular pigs had the same kind of heart that we needed for heart transplants for humans. So, I mean, if you look at something like that, AI is not, from what you're telling me, is not going to have the capability to find those types of people. So we still need humans. Going back to what I was asking about the human factor, we still need humans for these roles. All right. So people are afraid, and there's a huge discussion around how many jobs are going to be lost to AI versus human roles. So let's talk about that for a minute. What do you think is going to happen then as we move forward with AI? Where are we going to need humans? Where are we going to be able to still augment the human emotion, I guess, and human creativity and human knowledge, right? For some of the roles that we're working on versus going, hey, that's something that we can use AI for, chat GPT. And let's talk about chat GPT in the article that you sent me, right? We can go ahead and incorporate that. But when we talk about utilizing the human factor, let's dive into that just a little bit more on the HR and talent acquisition side, especially for the tools that we need for applicant tracking and sourcing candidates.
Okay, I'm not sure about applicant tracking, so we'll come back to that, or you can tell me a little bit more about that. But let's talk about sourcing for a moment. Let's go with the example you just gave a moment ago. So, yeah, the AI probably would not help you find a tissue specialist for Medtronic, but you just created verbally there a model for what you're looking for. You're looking for somebody who understands and has relationships with the pig farmers of a certain kind of pig, and somebody who knows enough about the relationship to hearts. And so now you can have a way of creating that model. Hey, the ideal person has this knowledge about pig farming, this knowledge about tissue, this knowledge about hearts, and is able to communicate with people and is able to build relationships with the farmers, which are things that an AI would not be able to find, building relationships. And you can construct a way of detecting and actually having conversations with the people, finding out, are they the type of people who can build relationships both with pig farmers and with Medtronic? Do they have the relations now, or can they build new relationships? So kind of building that model of what it takes to have a successful person, and then implementing that. And yeah, and then at that point, you can use AI to sort through the resumes and find who knows pig farmers in general. But then you have to take the fine tuning, and you're out there and then having the conversations with the people, whatever else. In terms of Chat GPT, so I showed you a beautiful article, and I love the title of it. And it's a published article, and I think peer reviewed published article, which is amazing because the title is Chat GPT is bullshit. And I love that title. Chat GPT is bullshit. And I mean, it's a legitimate article, peer reviewed and everything else article, and they come up with a definition of bullshit. And that's what I guess it would be good to communicate to our HR friends here is, what do they mean by bullshit? So it's about what the purpose is that you're setting this AI to do. It achieves its purpose, but you have to set the right purpose. And the purpose they said is to imitate humans. Great. Nothing about being true. So there's examples, published articles, whatever else, where people like lawyers have gone out there and done legal briefs using ChatGPT. And it comes up with all these references of these past cases, and they don't exist. But it reads like a wonderful legal review, but it made stuff up that doesn't exist. All right. Okay. Similarly, people have tried to write articles using ChatGPT, and they come up with these references, and the references are just made up. Sounds like a real reference. And then the reason they're calling it ChatGPT is bullshit is that's what a bullshitter does to you. If you're talking to somebody who's trying to bullshit you, trying to get you on a date, or trying to make you think he knows or she knows more than they do, they will feed you bullshit. And that's what ChatGPT is doing. It doesn't care whether it's true or not. It cares to impress you. ChatGPT is great at impressing you, and sometimes the information is true, but sometimes not, because it doesn't care. That's not part of its programming. It's not part of its goal is to be true. Its goal is to impress you. That is very human-like.
Well, when I was reading that article, Chat GPT is bullshit that you sent me, it talks a couple things. It mentions there's the general bullshit rule that we all are aware of. Soft bullshit produces without intention to mislead the hearer regarding the utterer's agenda. The thing that came out of that for me, and we hear about with Chat GPT and AI in general, and I interviewed a woman who had written a book called The Algorithm, Hilke Shellman. And in her book, it talks about this, where AI, it's not like it's intentionally trying to mislead you, right?
No, it has no intentions at all. It doesn't care whether it misleads you or not.
Right, right. But the other thing that comes up too, and it came up with her book, was the hallucinations. So let's talk about that for a minute, because that actually can happen, and we've heard about it happening with tools that are designed for human resources and talent acquisition. That AI will actually think that it's providing you with the right information, right? Based on the criteria that you give it. However, what it feeds back to you is not accurate. So isn't that what the hallucination is about?
Yeah, they're calling it hallucinations. This article is saying that it's not hallucination because it's not imagining something; it's making stuff up. Okay? So it's not really hallucinating. They say that anthropomorphizes. That makes us think like the AI is a real human being. No, it doesn't care at all. It just made stuff up. It's not an hallucination. That's why it says a better word than hallucination is bullshit. But you're right. That's the vernacular people, the wording people, the term people use as hallucinations. But yes, ChatGPT and other AI will make stuff up because its goal is just to answer your question and give you something that will impress you that it answered the question. And it does a good job of impressing people. And sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not true, but it doesn't care if that's its goal. If it feeds you stuff that's true, that met the goal of impressing you, great. If it fed you stuff that's just made up, a hallucination in that terminology, that's just bullshit in the ChatGPT is it bullshit article, it's also happy. It fed you something
Yeah,
that
it
impressed
doesn't
you.
it doesn't care. Yeah. Well, And it's interesting because when I use Gemini and I ask Gemini some questions, sometimes it'll actually come back to me and tell me, this is not verified to be true. I mean, you need to do a little more digging yourself. This is what I'm coming up with for you.
Well, good, good. So somebody bright there at that company has started to say, hey, we should put some warnings on the fact that you may be getting misinformation. You may be getting bullshit. We're not going to use the word bullshit, but you may be getting bullshit. So double check this.
Yeah, but going back to like I was asking you earlier, when executives are making these budget decisions on tools to make, what questions should they be asking the tools providers about those tools prior to purchasing them? And so because the contracts that go along with these tools can be a year long, 3 years long, 5 years long.
Okay, so in terms of the tracking itself and showing where they are in the process, that part, wonderful. That's a good thing, and it probably can be enhanced a little bit. And so when they have the executives are talking about that aspect of it, of the actual tracking where they are in the different stages, they can request things that would enhance the image and relationship of the company. Hey, if people get rejected, will you have a really good form letter? And can we make sure that form letter is going to be positive, and for the people who are in the process, have a way that we're making sure we're staying in communication and letting the people know that we care and whatever else, and a way of bringing in the human element of being able to people make a phone call to them or whatever else if appropriate. So you can make that kind of a human AI partnership on the tracking thing so that throughout the process, people feel engaged, people feel like you care, and the HR people are not wasting their time, but are also being used in the way they can be used, where they're bringing in that human image of it. In terms of screening, yeah, that's what we talked about before. The questions they would have is, okay, tell us about your screening algorithm. How does it handle some of the problems? And we started going through some of the problems. One of the problems is won't work in rare situations. Another problem in general is going to be kind of the bullshit kind of aspect, but I'll leave that alone for now. Um, but another aspect is it's going to sometimes drive wrong decisions. And there's a whole when Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in 2002 in economics, and he basically showed that psychology, human behavior, has an aspect in decisions we make financially, and they were not taking that into account. The same thing isn't true when we bring AI into the HR process. We're leaving out the human element, and we're assuming people are like machines as well, and it can go wrong. We make judgments about people. Realize how much of our society is right now focused on the fact that we're prejudiced. We make decisions about people that are inappropriate. We decide, hey, a person's of this color or this religion. We make a fast decision about that. That's a heuristic gone wrong. And I told you, Denise, Google had a big thing a few years ago. They had an image recognition system. And when it looked at black people, it called them gorillas. Made a big bad thing that was horrible. But just realize that's not something that is a nature of when you do that form of artificial intelligence and you're just looking for any kind of correlation, any kind of similarities, and you make a judgment. Just like people make a judgment, if you're black, oh, there's something wrong with you, or if you're this religion, there's something wrong with you. That prejudice that we don't like in society, AI is imitating that worst part of that thinking process. And so, hey, this person has on this resume this, reject. There's no human element, but you're making that decision. You're doing that same kind of thing. Effectively, what Google did with their thing is create a racist, wasn't intentionally racist, but they created a racist artificial intelligence. You can do that throughout the HR system, not just with racism, but in general, making wrong decisions about people, ruling people out based on inappropriate things, because that's what your AI just did for you. It just imitated that worst of human nature.
Well, and like you said too, it will be only looking for certain keywords
It may
that
be
are,
working for keywords.
yeah, that are related to that
But it may
job.
have analyzed, for example, and make up an example here that may or may not be true, and may have analyzed all the successful people in the past, and it never has anybody come from Prairie View A&M, a mostly black university in Texas. Never. So somebody applies, God, they're master's and PhD, brilliant person from Prairie View. They just got rejected because the AI showed Nobody's ever been accepted. Nobody's ever succeeded from peer review A&M, and they just got rejected based on that heuristic.
Yeah, going back though to executives buying these tools because I attended some conferences last year and will attend some this year as well. And it's amazing, Eric, the number of tools that are being sold out there right now. And the people that are contacting me, for example, wanting me to test drive their tools, right?
Oh, yes. Okay.
And I'm happy to do so. However, how are your tool? I guess what are the questions I want to ask them? Even as a user, what questions do I want to ask them before I even make that determination that I want to test drive their tools? I'm supposed to have a demo next week with somebody.
Okay, let me start with the problem with what they're asking you to do, and then I'll try to propose an answer for you right afterwards. Okay, so the problem with that is everybody's trying to sell to you. And so if you start with a blank slate, everybody's going to impress you. So, hey, everybody's going to say, hey, my AI does this, 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 and this. And you're looking at, oh, yeah, it does that. Oh, isn't that cool? The shiny object syndrome, right? They're going to all get you with that shiny object. Every one of them is going to do that to you. Now, if you ask them, how is your AI program different than these other five? They've already done that competitive analysis and they're going to tell you all, well, they have this and we have this, and they're going to impress you. And the problem is if you go to each of these people, they're going to speak that same language. They're going to say, well, that group you talked to yesterday, well, here's what's wrong with theirs and here's how we're so much better. And you don't have a nice, clean way of saying, well, I got sold yesterday. They were wonderful. Today, I'm impressed. And each day you get impressed. And it's kind of like whoever impresses you last might win out in that scenario, right? And so that kind of model of looking at each of them individually, one at a time, and have them talk about their strengths may not work out so well because they're going to be so good at the selling and they're just going to try to appeal to your emotions on their selling points. And then, of course, probably in a positive way, but degrade their competition compared to them and tell how they're so much better than the competition. So I think the solution that comes to me, and this is just I haven't prepared an answer, I'm just giving you off the cuff, is to create a model for what you're looking for. So when you go into any of these companies, what do I want? I want a model that is going to do a good job of maximizing the chances I'm going to find at least one, preferably as many as however n good candidates that meet the criteria and also has a good way of interfacing with people. So both I can interface it and my team can interface it with it and bring the human element in there, but also it interfaces perhaps in a way with the candidates so that the candidates that we might reject don't feel negative towards us and the people who are going on feel like they're being communicated with. Does your system do that? And if not, how can we enhance it to do that? So looking at what success looks for you, and I just made up my own version of success. But and then so in my mind, the success of a candidate involves, do they have the right skills? Are they able to communicate? Can they work with other? Can they learn new things? And will your thing fit with my model of what it takes to have a successful candidate? And so have a model in mind of what you're looking for the software to do. So rather than them driving the conversation in terms of how our software is great because it does this, this, and this, and this, oh, shiny object. I want to be able to have this outcome, and I don't want to have these outcomes. So here's my model of how things should work. Can you align your system with me? And if not, how can we change it? How can we bring the things in so it does work for me?
I did that with a couple of companies that I did demos on last year. I like the idea of making a model. I'm an executive. I'm going to make a model. I'm going to tell this software company that wants to sell me this tool, hey, here's what I'm looking for. Like, I love what you said about I want to control the conversation as the executive. But there's just so many pieces of this that are still the time factor that are still not quite clicking for me. So as we move forward this year, I guess what are like 3 key things that you think that we need to be looking at before we purchase tools that are going to be really crucial for this year?
Okay, well, I guess my first one that comes to mind is don't just purchase AI because it's a shiny object, because you're saying you have an actual benefit you're looking for. And maybe for you for note taking, maybe it's not beneficial for you. maybe it's not a benefit for you. Maybe there are other people in talent acquisition for whom they hate taking notes, and AI will make them more efficient talent acquisition people because it does what they are bad at. English is not their first language or whatever reason. And so now it lets them keep their strengths and it augments them where they're weak, in their case, note taking. So, what is it that you're looking for to gain from AI? So, have as a kind of a model in mind, what am I looking for from AI? I don't want AI just because it's a shiny object, because it's a cool word to say. What do I want to do? What's this going to do for me? What's this going to do for my company? What's this going to do for my candidates? What's it going to do to and for my talent acquisition people? And then negotiate kind of, what is this worth to me? And now how much am I willing to pay? So already have an idea of it. And then if the price comes in, 100 times what you think is valuable for you, maybe we'll do without AI. Be willing to say, no, I'm not going to use it there. Or, hey, we're going to start it on a small scale for handling these particular problems. We're having trouble hiring top executives. We're having trouble hiring people in South Korea. What is your specific problem that can help you for this year? So start with, what is it that you're trying to improve with AI, and a model for what you want and what's holding you back now. How can AI help you get past what's holding you back from achieving whatever you need to achieve this year?
Okay, perfect. And there is a presentation that you've done for IBM that we discussed. What is it that you are presenting exactly to them?
Exactly. So I decided I'm going into IEEE, I'm going into IBM, and I'm just going to give you my thought process. I'm going in there to talk about AI. Do I consider myself an AI expert? Not really. I'm not sure what people in the world, I'm sure there are lots of people who call themselves AI experts, but I've done things with AI for a number of years, but I don't really consider myself an AI expert yet. IBM and now IEEE want me to come in and give a talk in front of gobs of people, some of whom think they are experts, and some of whom therefore will think they want to compete with me. So my strategy at that point is, okay, rather than going in there with the normal kind of stuff, let me go in there with something that's going to be a little bit more provocative. I'm going to talk about what's wrong with AI. And so that my presentation is basically about and trying to understand, here's what's wrong with AI and here's why that's wrong. And then finally towards the end, so here are some things you can do about it. Here are some directions you can go with AI. And IBM is involved with, in fact, IBM is involved with AI for HR. I checked on their website. They actually have a link for that. And I think other companies as well. But the one I'm working with is IBM, and I have a high respect for them. But um, being able to tell these people at IEEE and IBM, be honest about the fact that there's things wrong with AI, and some of them are fundamental to the way we're doing AI, and some of them are not. Some of them are things that you're gonna have to look at other ways of doing things, and some of them are gonna be some adjustments you need to make, but you need to recognize you cannot get better at something until you recognize the problem. So my presentation is largely about, here's what's wrong with AI, and giving them some insight why it's wrong with AI. And part of it is what I said earlier. You're imitating a part of human thought that's already been found to be problematic. Heuristic thinking. You're imitating, in most cases, heuristic thinking, and there's something wrong with heuristic thinking, and it will sometimes drive okay things because there's a reason thinking exists. But there are things wrong with heuristic thinking that we're dealing with in the world, and you're replicating the good, the bad, and the ugly of heuristic thinking when your artificial intelligence is artificial heuristics, including artificial racism and things like that. So recognize that there are some problems with it, and then I go through the different types of AI and showing how where they came from, how they evolved from certain things in the world of statistics, probability and statistics. And then I do go through the article, ChatGPT is bullshit, to try to make it a little bit funny, but also try to make them see the very famous LLM. Here's an article about what's wrong with LLM. Why you're getting what they call hallucinations. This article saying it's not hallucinations, not bullshit. And then, as I said, close with, so here are some alternative approaches to deal with these issues. If you want to make AI better, here are some suggestions of things you might think about. These are my suggestions. I may or may not be expert enough to give you good suggestions, but at least I'm giving you a starting point. Here's some ideas of how you can make AI better.
Love it. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, can they just contact you through LinkedIn?
Yeah, they can contact me through LinkedIn, or they can email me. My name, what's unusual about my name is I have Everything's doubled in my last name. I'm M, even M looks like a double, M-double-A-double-S. But Eric.Maass at Outlook.com or on LinkedIn. I'm not the only Eric Maass. Actually, there's another guy at IBM. I don't work at IBM. I work with them. I'm a consultant to them. But there's a couple other people in the world. So if you go on LinkedIn, just find the right Eric Maass. This is what I look like. But Eric.Maass at Outlook.com if they want to email me. And yeah, I'm the Eric Maass that had 30 years at Motorola and 11 years at Medtronic. That's the right LinkedIn, Eric Maass, or even the Eric Maass link there. But yeah, they can contact me through LinkedIn. I love having LinkedIn contacts. They can email me, eric.maass at outlook.com. And I generally respond pretty quickly to emails, and I generally respond quickly to any chats on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Denise. Have a wonderful day. It's a weekend. Have a wonderful
Yeah,
weekend. I
you
don't know if
too,
it'll be a
Eric.
weekend when people read the podcast, but it's a weekend now as we're
Yeah,
speaking to each other.
it is. Thank you.
Take care.